Buzz, buzz. That little buzz was that little bit of honey that I put in my tea this morning. And it was that apple that I had for a snack at lunch. It was the flowers that I stopped to smell, 2 weeks ago. And it's all due to the unsung heroes of nature. Those tiny little buzzers. I'm talking about bees. According to Southeastern Minnesota's Beekeeping Association, the big buzz about bees is that they pollinate 80% of the world's plants, and that includes 90 different edible plant species. And for you economists out there, that means $15 billion of profit for the U.S. Agricultural Association. Specifically, when we think about bees, we think about honey. And honey is not only amazing because it's sweet and delicious, but it's the only food that doesn't spoil, it's the only insect-produced food, and it has so many medicinal properties. So many buzzes about bees. When I met with the Southeast Beekeeping Association at Quarry Hill Nature Center last month, they were so excited to share all of their knowledge with me. So before I met with them, I didn't know that bees can fly up to 6 miles away from their hive to collect nectar, and they leave that hive 15 times a day. On each venture out, they visit 100 flowers. That means that they visit 1,500 flowers a day. That means that that bee visiting 1,500 flowers collects up to 5 pounds of nectar. That teeny tiny little bee collects 5 pounds of nectar. And about 5 pounds of nectar, 4 to 5, creates 1 pound of honey. And about 8 pounds of nectar creates 1 pound of beeswax. To put it into thought here too, an average American consumes about 1.5 pounds of honey annually. Now, unfortunately, our bee population is threatened, and Greenpeace, the United States Department of Agriculture, local experts, and international organizations all agree on what is threatening the bee population. These threats include habitat loss, climate change, pesticides, invasive species, parasites, and disease. Once again, when I met with the Southeast Beekeeper Association, they were more than willing to share with me the human impact that has been imposed on the bee population. If you consider all of those threats I listed before, they can all be traced back to human impact. And that impact can be big buzz and little buzz, just like the positives of bees. The big buzz is that bees are dying at unprecedented rates. In the last decade, there's been 40% loss of U.S. colonies. In 2017, the honeybee was placed on the United States Endangered Species List. And the U.S. population of bees in general has fallen by 60% since the 40s. I gathered that information from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now the little buzz, and I call it little because it would just affect us, it affects our cupboards, is that without bees, we would lose 100% of the almonds and 90% of each apples, onions, blueberries, carrots, cucumbers, and so many other delicious treats. Now in 2006, we had the first report of what's called colony collapse disorder. A colony collapse disorder happens when the worker bees abandon an otherwise healthy hive. They abandon ample food, they abandon their queen, and according to an article written by Chuck Abbott in 2020 for agriculture.com, we are not exactly sure what to trace colony collapse disorder to. Now, I brought this article up when I went to go meet with the Southeastern Bee Association, and they were abuzz about how disappointed they felt about the article and the misrepresentation, because colony collapse can once again be directly related to human impact and directly related to climate change. Fortunately, there are organizations like the Bee Conservatory to help remedy some of these situations. And when I say situations, I mean we do know a cause, but an entire article was written for agricultural.com because we didn't realize, we weren't aware of what bees do for our ecosystem, our life, and our society as a whole. So the Bee Conservatory was founded in 2009 in response to that very crisis. They wanted to make people more aware of how important bees are and how rapidly their population is declining, and what that can mean for us as a population as well. So again, founded in 2009 in response to that crisis, and they hope to protect all bees, secure environmental and food justice through education, research, habitat creation, and advocacy. So as I mentioned, in 2006, colony collapse disorder was first reported. And this is also, it coincided with the release of Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth climate change documentary. In 2009, the UN started to focus on feeding the hungry, and this brought attention to how bees impact the world food production. So as a result, the Bee Conservatory started to work towards educating people about how bees impact these bigger picture, how the little buzz of bees impacts the big buzz of things like global hunger. So as they started working, they started small. They focused on urban beekeeping, creating bee sanctuaries, and focusing on climate impacts such as hurricanes, floods, droughts, and educating people about how this impacts beehives and colonies. In 2015, the Bee Conservatory started a program called Sponsor a Hive. They went into schools and communities to offer building a colony and educating those communities, educating those demographics, in hopes that they could not only stimulate the bee population, but also encourage communities to contribute to the bee population on their own as well. Once again, as I mentioned before, in 2017, the bees were put on the endangered species list. And unfortunately, there was a silver lining to this, or fortunately, there was a silver lining to this, and it did create some more awareness, and the Bee Conservatory saw an uptick in interaction with its programs. So not only can you contribute to the Bee Conservatory in a financial way, and they do offer that on their website, they give a couple of options to contribute to supporting the bees and an uptick in population growth for those bee colonies here locally. They suggest planting a bee garden. So this can be looking online and finding out locally what grows well and what is good as far as nectar and pollination goes. They encourage you to go chemical free. So this is about being a conscious buyer when you go into the shops and not using things that maybe are pesticides that are going to impact the bee colonies. They encourage you to be a citizen scientist, so doing your own research and knowing what your impact on the world around you is. They support a Trees for Bees program. Again, this is about like fruit trees and just cultivating habitats for the bees locally. Creating a bee bath. Little did I know, the Southeast Bee Association shared with me that bees need water just like we do. So creating a little bee bath in your bee garden is helpful. And then building native homes. So that means when you see a dead tree, not automatically removing it, noticing that if there is a hive there, preserving that area. And then Tiffany Dowie of EcoWatch wrote an article just here in 2021 that further supports doing your own research about the threats to bees, because it is ever changing, just like climate change is ever changing. And she just really encouraged us to, as with the Bee Conservatory, to be your own scientist. And of course, keeping up with local beekeepers at Quarry Hill, Oxbow Park, the Southeast Bee Association. They're not doing any meetings for the rest of the winter, but they interact via email great. And just remember that there's a big buzz and a little buzz to the bee population. And if you want to keep having an apple for a snack and honey in your tea, your little buzz impacts the big buzz. Thanks.